Welcome back to the Capitol Report. I'm Steve Lance reporting from Seoul, South Korea. So what can be done to protect South Korea's cultural and artistic freedom? And what do the people of Korea think about the Chinese Communist Party's influence in their country? To learn about these issues, I sat down with Greg Scarlatow. He's the executive director of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. He also works with the United States State Department and has lived in South Korea for many years. Greg Scarlatow, thank you so much for joining us.
The pleasure's all mine.
Greg, Shenyun Performing Arts, an American arts troupe, it's faced a lot of barriers actually performing in South Korea due to the CCP's interference. What do you make, or are you surprised by China's influence over this sovereign nation?
I'm not surprised by China's influence. This is a common Chinese practice of trying to capitalize on commercial, trade, investment ties to place pressure, tremendous amounts of pressure on countries such as South Korea. Now, Shenyun had many performances here in the United States, the Kennedy Center, the Lincoln Center, no problem whatsoever. South Korea is a staunch friend, ally, and partner of the United States, and South Korea is a democratic country. So this is a rather blunt, blatant, rude, I would say, undiplomatic at the very least, interference with the fundamental rights and freedoms embedded in the very Korean constitution. Why? Because China has the leverage, or it thinks it has the leverage. China is South Korea's largest export partner, South Korea's largest import partner, South Korea's largest trading partner, and of course, South Korea is China's third largest trading partner. Let us not even talk about South Korean investment in China.
There seems to be a bit of a disconnect. There's many polls that come out of South Korea that show very low favorability among the Korean people toward China. So with that said, and that's mainly due to China's ties with North Korea, or a big part of it anyway, two communist nations. How do such instances of interference that you just mentioned with the Shenyun Performing Arts get overlooked?
If they find out about this, South Koreans will not be happy to hear about Chinese interference with the right embedded in Article 22 of the South Korean Constitution, the right to perform, the right to engage in free expression, and the right to access artistic performances. South Koreans are fundamentally upset with the fact that China protects and supports the North Korean regime of Kim Jong-un that's starving its own people, oppressing its own people, crushing their fundamental human rights, exploiting and oppressing its own people at home and abroad in order to procure the resources it needs, the hard currency it needs in order to develop its nuclear and ballistic missile program. These are programs that threaten the lives of the 53 million South Koreans living in the South. Of course, South Koreans are upset with this.
Greg, how can South Korea maintain its cultural and artistic freedoms while also ensuring national and economic security amidst deep economic ties with China?
We need issues, and this is clearly an issue. We need to reach out to diplomatic missions in South Korea. We need to reach out to relevant UN agencies. We need to reach out to embassies at critical locations. By the way, the U.S. State Department issues a human rights report every spring. In its human rights report on South Korea, the United States Department of State did mention this issue of performances stifled through Chinese intervention and discrimination by China, and worse, much worse, against Falun Gong in its own report on human rights in South Korea. So this is already an issue that is known.
Greg Scarlatow, thank you so much for joining us.
The pleasure's all mine. And best of luck to all of us. We fight for rights. We fight tyranny. We got them surrounded.
Thank you, Greg. The Chinese Communist Party exerts influence over Korea through a variety of tactics. What are they specifically? And why are these tactics still working despite the majority of Korean people holding an unfavorable view of the CCP. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao sat down with Dr. Tara Oh, an adjunct fellow at the Hudson Institute. Dr. Oh has done extensive research on South Korea's political and economic systems. She's also worked at the Pentagon.
Dr. Tara Oh, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me here.
So we in the U.S., we consider South Korea as a very important democratic ally of the U.S. But based on your in-depth research, you found that the Chinese Communist Party actually has been conducting various kinds of influence operations in Korea, trying to influence its arts, media, culture, if not even the government. So tell us more about that. What specific tactics have you seen and how is it done?
When we think about Korea, we normally think, oh, it's an ally of the United States. It has top economy in the world. And so we don't usually worry about South Korea. We normally look at North Korea and North Korean threat, North Korean missiles. But what we have not looked at deeply is the subversion by the Chinese Communist Party in Korea. And it's not really well spread, it's not well known, but it is extensive and it is rather deep. So CCP has United Front Department, as is well known, and it tries to subvert the government and the countries in which it operates. And it, of course, has operations in South Korea as well. What I understand is that regarding Chen Yun, first of all, it's another cultural warfare, as I mentioned, but in this case, it's blocking the culture so that it cannot be seen by South Koreans. Of course, it applies pressure. It applies the traditional tactics. It could be blackmail, it could be money, it could be some scandal. So they have various methods of doing this.
That's very interesting. And you mentioned the fact that the CCP is trying to block Koreans, like the Korean ordinary people, from seeing Shen Yun, which is, trying to first present authentic Chinese culture, but also try to, tell people about what is China like before communism. So why do you think the Chinese government is so afraid of Korean people seeing that?
I think China wants to promote itself, CCP, as the legitimate authority over entire China. And if you show older culture, pre-CCP culture, then it shows that China it's possible to run China by some other than CCP. And I think that's their concern. They want to make sure that the entire world views China that is run by CCP and CCP only.
Why do you think such, things affected by the CCP are still taking place in Korea? Let it be the statue or now Shen Yun being blocked. What do you think gives them the opportunity to still do this under a pro-US Korean government?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Of course, the administration changed from the previous president was Moon Jae-in, who was in power from 2017 to May 2022. Now, with the new administration, the change in the relations or the way the alliance relations is viewed has changed dramatically. The last administration, they were sort of distanced from the public when it comes to showing support for the alliance.
But what should the Korean government do now, facing, of course, continuous pressure from the CCP on the one hand, but now also, having to face the reality that the world is not agreeing with their tactics?
So what happened when former President Moon Jae-in left the office? Right before he left the office, he placed thousands of people who support his ideology into various government offices. And South Korean government is rather large. It has not only the ministries and different agencies, but it also has some of the entities that are quasi-public. And so in many of these places, Moon placed his people there. And so they continue the old policy. So what the new government needs to do is identify them and replace them with people that will support the current administration's policies, which is, he mentioned freedom multiple times. So people who would support his policies that defend freedom for South Korea.
Dr. Taro, thanks so much for the great insights from inside Korea and also about Korea's position in the world. Thank you so much.
This concludes part one of our special programming from Seoul, South Korea. We'll have more for you tomorrow, so please stay tuned. I'm Steve Lance. Thank you for watching, and have a nice evening.